Hey, what's up?
Hey, good evening.
Just you're reading. I never learned to read. Anyway, my name is J.W. Colwell. Thank you for joining us on Generation Movie on this wonderful. In Florida, Joe and I are both in Florida. We are bracing for Hurricane Idalia. So we're gonna see what happens there.
Jeez, hold on. I'm sorry. This is like.
Why are you breaking stuff, Rich? Why are you breaking stuff? I am happy to be joined tonight by my co-host in crime, the ebullient. You didn't do a funny line tonight. It's just Film Buff Online tonight. Look at mine. Mine's classy. In a race for power and glory. Forgot one small thing. We forgot to hook up the doll. My co-host and my good friend, Rich Drees, movie historian, film critic, and now screenplay winning.
Oh,
screenplay winning. Did you write the screenplay? This screenplay that won?
Yes, I did.
And screenplay winner at film festivals happening all across the Northeast. Rich Drees. Good evening, Rich. How are you doing tonight?
Well, thank you. I'm doing well. First of all, it was one film festival where one of the short films that my good friend and filmmaking partner Natasha, who we've all met on the show before, we had
can't shut her up on the show.
The one we
can't shut her up on the show.
What?
You can't shut her up on the show. She comes on and just takes control.
Now you know what our production meetings are like.
I can imagine.
But out of about 30 short films, one of the ones that we had in the festival, called The Test, which I happen to have written, got the Best Screenplay Award for the entire day, which honestly I'm very humbled by. There are some great short films.
You are far too humble. You won a screenplay competition. Just let it fucking go, man. You're good. You write good stuff. You won a competition. Nobody needs to know it was a small short film. You're a winner. You're a big winner. Who's the big winner? Rich is. Rich is the big winner, and so is Cineveris and everybody else involved with the movie.
So that was a wonderful surprise, and hopefully as we keep rolling this film out across some more film festivals through the rest of the year into next year, we'll have some more luck with it.
Okay, we got some people here. Let's say hi to commenters. There are peeps that need to be taken care of. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I do want to say though, I mean, my name is on the screenplay. My name, is on the credits, but it really was a collaborative effort because Natasha kept pushing me to rewrite a couple of scenes and make them better and better and better. And without that kind of push, it wouldn't have been as good a script as it is. So, she deserves, just as much credit there as I feel. Yeah.
Okay. We know you're humble. You're a good guy. Natasha, you guys.
It's not going to hang in her place. It's going to hang in my office. this.
Oh, there you go. It's right there. Joe Ridgely joining us tonight. Good evening, gentlemen. I tried to get Michael Berryman on for a minute. Joe, if you had done that, Joe, we'd be better friends than we are today. No, we're still friends. We're super friends, but we would have been better friends. Hey, brothers. Hey, Sean. How you doing? Thank you for joining us. Yes, we are. Grocery stores are a nightmare. Yes. Oh my God. We went to Target. It's really wild. It's a run on water and toilet paper. Down here, it's water and toilet paper. Up back home, when there's a big snowstorm coming, it's milk, bread, and eggs. Mm-hmm. But here, it's water and toilet paper.
Because when disaster strikes, you want French toast.
I guess. I don't know. I think it's like a coal mine thing. Like, they made them eggs every day, so everybody that's what eggs and toast. It's the easiest thing to make. Congrats, Rich, from Joe. And then congrats from Ken McKernan. Ken McKernan, welcome back. Thank you for joining us tonight. So before we get to this, which is a lot of fun, before we get to this, let's do a quick roundup of some news stories that are really interesting. Rich, I want to talk to you for a moment about something I used to like. I used to like director's cuts. I used to like them. There are several films that I am a big proponent of the director's cut being better than the original. I find that they can be a very good use for a director who maybe got squished by the system or got pushed in a direction they didn't want to go. Prime examples would be The Abyss. The Abyss is one of them. For whatever reason, Fox made Cameron cut it. And the lengthier version of the movie is far more incredible than the version we get. The version we get is really good, but there is a massive sequence of tidal waves that hit all the continents. That's an amazing adaptation, amazing addition, and it explains so much more than the ending where it kind of chomps along and ends in the original.
I think there's a deeper thematic resonance with the additional material in there that just gives, a film that already has some decent substance in talking about
marriage,
emotion, and marriage and love and things like that. And then it adds in this other layer, which I think is just,
the idea that but it's there and it's important. Blade Runner has 17 different versions. I'm exaggerating. Blade Runner has so many different versions, but the one that became the final cut, if Ridley Scott doesn't want him to have a narration that Harrison Ford sounds like he's sluggishly dealing before his morning coffee, fine, right? But what I'm seeing now, Rich, is that we're getting directors, and they're directors I love. One director I love, and then another director who has got a fan base that is going to rigidly ask for this, even if we don't need it. There's been rumors going around that there are two major movies coming out that already have director's cuts in the making, Rich. And for the longest time, the director's cut was supposed to be something where it was something done to the director, right? It was something where a bad experience did to the director. Nobody is stopping Ridley Scott on the Apple project that he's working on, this Napoleon movie, from making it as long as he wants. There is going to be, you're going to run into problems when you're making a 4-hour movie. But right now they submitted one cut, and he's hopeful Apple will immediately drop the director's cut when it heads to Apple TV. Just whatever cut, make your decision. But they're so long, Rich. It's almost double the amount. The movie is getting ready. He has one cut that clocks in at 270 minutes. So 3 hours and 30 minutes. And then he has another version that's clocking in that's already been rated. That's about an hour and a half shorter. Now, Ridley Scott has already had a bad experience, and then a good director's cut. Another director's cut that doesn't get talked about enough is the Kingdom of Heaven director's cut, right?
Which is amazing.
It's amazing. It should have been a much bigger hit. It's one of the more underrated epic sandal epics, right? You know, really great war film, amazing about the Crusades. It's great, right? It's a great movie.
Definitely.
But so, you know, Ridley Scott is a little gun shy. The other person that's not gun shy and will basically saunter up to you at a bar and explain why a version of his movie needs to be longer is Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder has this Rebel Moon movie coming out for Netflix. The trailer dropped, Rich, and I was just sitting there going, how did this not get copywritten? How did this not get, there's laser swords, princesses, galaxies far, far away. And it was originally conceived as a Lucasfilm project and as a Star Wars project until they came in and just went, no, get out. Like, no. And now he's making this movie, and immediately you get a thing today where he's basically saying, I just want the director's cut to be seen. You know, and one is PG-13 and one is hard R. And it's like, and you know, Snyder is just obsessed with these. And so it becomes this, like, you know, he makes a movie called Sucker Punch. He gets job there, and then he makes a director's cut, and it's a little bit better because it has some of the stuff that movie needed that they didn't have in a PG-13 rated movie about a mental asylum, right?
Yes.
But then Justice League happens, and now it's like, now I feel like he's gonna act like a whiny baby every time he makes a movie and be like, I can't run a movie that's 7.5 hours long. They won't let me. But it's here if you want to watch it.
Make it a TV series then. Don't make it a movie. And frankly, if you're trying to
release
tell
it
a
in
movie
2 parts,
frame, learn to be a better and more economical storyteller. I've said it before. Zack Snyder, really good visualist, but I think his storytelling sucks. And this is just another example of like, oh, I need all this time to tell all this stuff, and because my world is so, you know, expansive and stuff.
derivative. His world is so derivative, Rich. It's so derivative.
I'm quoting him, but yes, you're right. It is derivative. It's his remake of Battle Beyond the Stars / The Seven Samurai / The Magnificent Seven /
Star Wars
whatever else.
Whatever else.
Now, here's the thing. You know, people will automatically defend him. Will probably say something like, well, Star Wars is so derivative too because George Lucas wanted to make Flash Gordon and he made this instead. Yeah, he wanted to make Flash Gordon. So he made a space opera that draws on the inspiration, the thematical inspiration, the tonal inspiration of old Saturday matinee serials like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers. And then, you know, again, he did that with other serial stuff like Zorro's Fighting Legion and Spy Smash and stuff like that for Raiders of the Lost Ark. But he didn't outright fucking copy Mongo and Emperor Ming and the idea that the hero
he wasn't hired by
a crazy scientist. Show me the crazy scientist Darko Zarkov character in Star Wars. There's not.
Well, that's what I mean.
So,
he wasn't hired by King Syndicate to make a Flash Gordon movie, and then he made Star Wars. But I'm more concerned with this idea that these filmmakers, it's a thing that's been happening for a good 4 or 5 years, where we have hours and hours and hours and hours of movies to sit through, right? And I'm okay with it if the movie's really good, and I expect Napoleon to be fantastic. But there has to be some sort of economy. Like, I read that the Napoleon director's cut is basically because he doesn't have a lot of time with the lead actress as Josephine. Like, basically, Vanessa Kirby as Josephine. And clearly she's supposed to be fantastic in the movie. But the cut that's getting released doesn't have nearly enough of her and her derivative, like her wind through the story, right? So my answer to that is edit it better, do better. Like, where are we going with this? Like, with this, I have a 6-hour version of a movie in my head. I know I can only release a 2-hour movie to theaters because that's how movies work, right? I mean, you can say you're going to make a 3-hour movie and people are going to show up. Like Scorsese's movie Killers of the Flower Moon. People are going to show up. It's going to be 3 hours. People are going to sit there for 3 hours. Oppenheimer. I sat through Oppenheimer. It's great. 3 hours, fantastic. Has to be 3 hours, right? But you don't hear Nolan going, you know what? I have a 6-hour version of Inception. I have a 25-hour version of Dunkirk. You know what I mean? Like the filmmakers, and Spielberg has director's cuts too, but they're all like their director's cuts. Like the most director cut movie he has is Close Encounters, and they're wildly different versions of the film. So they're very divergent. And the only other cuts he's really had were, the cuts to E.T. that eventually he put back into place to put the dread back into the sequences that he changed.
There's something to be said about studying a director's cut versus a theatrical release, and I sort of hate that in some instances director's cuts replace the theatrical release in terms of availability. I'm thinking specifically right now of Mark Johnson's Daredevil.
Yeah,
you can only get
and the
that
producer. There's the producer's cut stuff too as well. I also like.
And there's things to be learned from studying both of those, but there's a lot of directors who, and I'll say it again, Snyder especially leads the pack in just being self-indulgent, and
he needs economy. He needs I was thinking about it, like the franchise that if you go on and try to buy online stuff or digital copies of things, there are more director's cuts of the Alien films than I've ever seen. Right? Like you look up and like there's a director's cut of Alien, there's a director's cut of Aliens, there's a director's cut of Alien 3, there's a director's cut of Alien Resurrection. There are so many director's cuts of these things, and sometimes you don't know the difference until you step into it and you realize you're watching the director's cut. And there's such subtle differences. In Aliens, it's like a 4-minute difference. In Alien, it's like a 6-minute difference because there's Tom Skerritt is plastered to a wall.
I think they did. There's those movies all have their direct, like expanded director's cuts released simply because they're putting together that Alien quadrilogy box set first on DVD and
they're popular. People want to see more of certain movies.
Yeah. And
like I said, I don't care.
Tom Skerritt, like up on the wall is, I think, very fascinating, because it's like, okay, that's cool. But on the other hand, in Aliens, James Cameron's movie, I think they were right to cut out all the stuff with the colony. We don't need that.
We don't. Well, and also they cut out one of the main sequences. They cut out that if you buy an Aliens magazine, you see there's a scene with Burke at the end of the movie that was written in script that Ripley run after Burke betrays them when they try to kill them. He tries to kill Ripley and Newt, and then he betrays them again by trying to lock them into a certain room while he's running by himself with no weaponry whatsoever, and he gets killed. The original test screening was super happy that he died. And so what happened was there was a sequence where during I call it the 2-minute run, where she's going for Newt, she finds him stuck to the wall and he apologizes for all of his bad behavior. And the answer to that is nobody wants to fucking see that. Nobody gives a shit. Everybody just wanted to see him get killed for being a douchebag. So I just think we need to rein in running times a little bit. We need to rein in this self iconoclast. I need to make a director's cut because maybe somebody didn't like my specific version of something. I'm over it.
Now that's it. And again, I'm going to preface this by saying director's cuts are great as an educational tool to study what you could cut and what you shouldn't cut. But Zack Snyder's Justice League at 4 hours and 10 minutes is
better.
Obviously, it's a much more coherent film because it's all him. It's not studio mandated Joss Whedon coming in and trying to tinker with the tone of the film and things like that. And there are a lot of things to argue about the Zack Snyder Justice League cut, starting with, the bullshit about, I always meant to, that it was going to be in like a bigger aspect ratio for IMAX, which is, similar to like
the goddamn television screen thing. Ridiculous fighting about stupid stuff.
Which is bullshit. When you look at,
but I certainly trust Ridley Scott more. But
I think it's a marginally better film in terms of tone and coherency, but it's still just an overly bloated film in terms of plot and story and nonsense.
With boring villains and just anyway. Yeah. But I understand that, and some director's cuts really work. The final cut of Blade Runner is a beautiful version of the movie. It is totally different from any other version you will ever see, and I've seen all of them. There was a big talk on our Loud Nerdy group page about cult films that people don't like, and Blade Runner's at the top of the goddamn list, and it got more votes than anything. Blade Runner and Rocky Horror. Now, the interesting thing about that is the Rocky Horror people who hated Rocky Horror had never seen it in a theater. And that was brought up to everybody who said Rocky Horror sucks. But it's an interesting kind of thing where Blade Runner, to me, is one of the more fascinating 80s sci-fi movies, not just because of the curses, the performances, everything about it is special. You know what I mean? So, but I understand.
In terms of Rocky Horror, I will say this. I'm always reminded of something a friend of mine in high school said when there was a bootleg of Rocky being passed around on VHS. And he is like, Rocky is an experience. You have to go to the theater to really see it. If you just sit at home and watch Rocky Horror on VHS or DVD, once it was eventually released on DVD and Blu-ray, etc., it's really just jerking off as opposed to just going to the movie and having the theatrical experience.
Yeah, but it's an interesting. It's an interesting
movie itself. If you were just watching it as a movie and not as that participatory experience,
it's bad. It needs the audience.
The first half is good. The second half, and I say this about the play itself too. I think it has major second act.
Yeah, it goes off the rails. Yeah. But another thing that came up in Hollywood this week, Rich, aside from Rocky Horror fighting about Blade Runner and stuff, but I thought it was a nice tie into everything that was going on the Loud Nerdy page. Plus what was going on in Hollywood with people declaring director's cuts before the movies even got them released. Another thing that happened...
Before we move off of that, can I just do one kind of semi-related thing here? Every now and then you see certain film sites talking about, so-and-so has a 5-hour edit of this movie, and then it came out in the theaters and it was only 2 hours and 5 minutes, blah, 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 blah. What happened? They're talking about an assembly edit, which is all the shot film thrown, and strung together
into an editor's desk, and they try to figure out a movie. They try to make the movie.
Yeah, that's not a director's cut. That's an assemblage, and you can look at that and go, oh, this scene, it has the full, wide take of the shot, and then it has like all the inserts and everything else scattered in there. And then you go, oh, well, we only need out of this minute of this insert, we only need about 30 seconds. And then suddenly, like, something this long becomes this long, half long. And, that's just the nature of editing. These websites, though, these bullshit news websites, don't tell you that, though. And that, I think, has created something of an appetite for, I want a longer version of this thing because I know it exists. When if you got what they were actually talking about, if people
it wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah,
it wouldn't make any sense because they
bored out of their mind watching these things.
Right, and there's this gifted person called an editor that goes in with the director and says, "What are you trying to do?" The movie, I think, that if you're talking about like director's cuts and weird cuts, that the movie that is always talked about from the 80s for me, and I'm sure it's for you too, there's always the Phantom Legend European cut that's sitting out there somewhere. There's and Universal got
Legend and Highlander, both.
Right, but
like
Universal got into it. Universal got into it because when they're selling Legend right now on sites, they have theatrical cut, and it's like the first thing you think if it says theatrical cut is, well, what are the other fucking cuts? Where are the rest of them? And I feel like it's just Universal adding into it. But Speaking of studios making shit up, Rich.
There is a substantial difference between the version of Legend that was released in Europe and the version that we got here in the US, including one extra goblin. The European version has a much better soundtrack. The Jerry Goldsmith soundtrack is so much better than the Tangerine Dream soundtrack, and I will fight anybody alone or in a group over this.
Excellent. I love fighting. Also, speaking of fighting,
and Highlander, there's like one additional flashback and one or two smaller things there that I think, help add to the movie as well that we didn't get here in the US initially. And I remember finding that European cut with the extra flashback at a Star Trek convention in college, and just like immediately throwing money at the dealer and then getting back to campus.
Well,
yeah, getting back to campus and saying, okay, everybody, we're meeting in my friend's room tomorrow because he's the one with the VCR and we're watching this. And, it was like 8 of us packed in there. We're like, yeah, here it is. Oh, my God. Ah! Oh, it was okay. But it's...
Well, that's what happens with most of these. But another thing that's happening in Hollywood, we have the WGA still on strike. We have SAG still on strike. We found out today two things happened in the last couple of days. One, the writers for late night programs are going to be considered for streaming because the studios now realize that late night shows are probably going to start streaming at some point. So they're going to be included. That was a great compromise made at the table. There still isn't a contract.
And also so much of late night material is now just getting chopped up and thrown onto the show's YouTube channels as content too.
Well, and also TikTok, everywhere else. You can't go out at 5 without seeing a Daily Show something.
It's
been
kind of weird the past 3.5 months not to see like
no news. It's rough. No late show. No
Seth Meyers stuff. Yeah, it's been really weird. It's kind of nice actually.
But an interesting thing about it, an interesting thing to the side. One of the things that happened this week is the studios lost a major copyright suit, and it really started to bring them back to the table because here's what happened. Basically, in this copyright suit, they went before a judge and said, hey, if we have an AI movie, we're creating it, and we would like the studio to have ownership and the copyright. And the judge, who is very well-known and well-versed in this copyright business, basically said no, because a copyright requires a human. So what has come across in the recent Writers Guild negotiations is that studios can use AI to create something, but they can't copyright protect it without substantial work from a human on the property. So I would say that we're still in a very big lurch, but it's an interesting thing that the studios aren't going to be able to use AI without people to polish and fix it and make it more human, which is interesting because they need it for the copyright. And I looked at it and just went, oh, this is a big win for writers, because if you have AI and you can just copyright it as a studio thing, it's a big win for writers to be able to walk in and go, your shit isn't copyrightable without me fixing it, making it better, or polishing a substantial. The judge said a substantial polish and work on any AI material. So we're talking, if it's an 80 pages of script, they said something like 60 pages have to be written, helped by human, which is, it's an incredible win for writers.
It is. And to be absolutely cynical about this, am now wondering how long we have to wait until somebody who, some congressperson who maybe has a nice campaign donation made to him by one of the studios introduces legislation to redefine copyright to include AI being able to,
copyrighted. Well,
AI material to be copyrightable.
I would agree with that, and we're going to end it there. I would agree that is the cynical view of it. Also, up until a few months ago, I would assume that rights and other things would have been protected by the Supreme Court, but we can't even guarantee that anymore. So anyway, let's talk about
something else that's more fun to do with computers.
Yes, exactly. Weird Science. Weird Science is one of those movies. You remember where you saw it. You remember who you saw it with. For me, you remember, either liking it or not liking it. And it's one of those movies that I think it's kind of like, it's like the redheaded stepchild of the Hughes oeuvre in the 80s. Yes, oeuvre is the word. Pinky swear on that one. You got to make a wish. And it's one of those movies where it's like, it's completely not like anything else up until that point that John Hughes had done, right? And so production was basic. Everything was in Illinois, right? So it started on September 24th, 84 in Skokie, Illinois, which Hughes, had basically a cottage industry of like filmmaking places and houses and everything he used. It got delayed till October 2nd because of something going on at the Northbrook Court Shopping Mall where he shot all his mall sequences. And then most of the location filming was on Chicago, Illinois. But most of the other production, sound stages and backlight, Wyatt's house and everything, is Universal City Studios in LA. And it wrapped pretty quickly. It only took 2 months to film, so like 60 days. And it was a very closed set. They didn't let anybody in because nobody knew what the fuck it was.
It's only 94 minutes, and it cooks. There's not an ounce of fat on this movie, I don't think.
No, it's as shining an example of 80s teen comedy as you can get, like 80s teen hybrid. Like, 80s, the 80s, middle 80s, late 80s became a hybrid zone where they were making, comedies with guys fighting ghosts. And, it's a hybrid.
Let's do a sci-fi comedy, let's do a teen comedy, and it kind of just,
meet in the middle and see what happens.
Got your chocolate and my peanut butter on this.
Yeah, your chocolates and my peanut butter's in your chocolate. One of the most interesting things about the production. So, everybody looks at this poster and goes, there can be no other Lisa, right? Kelly LeBrock is stunning on this poster. Kelly LeBrock is stunning in the movie. She's amazing in the movie. She's incredible. It's one of the better performances in a John Hughes movie. She knows what she's supposed to be, and she does it to a perfection. There's a charm and a charisma to her that is really endearing. But she wasn't gonna be in the goddamn movie. Like, they hired another girl, a Sports Illustrated girl, and basically there was a big falling out. Kelly Emberg, who's beautiful, a beautiful girl, but basically had a huge run-in with the producers, and it was the traditional creative differences. And so Kelly LeBrock tells a story where she was shooting on location with Sting in Ireland, I think it was. And she basically, they got a call, and her agent said, they want to hire you for this movie. And she's like, I read the script. I didn't think it was that great. And he's like, it is John Hughes though. And I guess at that point, they didn't know who had written it and who was directing. Because I guess it was like a blind script, and the audition was blind. And so her agent's like, he's all these movies coming out, and he's stringing together all these teen movies, and maybe it could be something big for your career. And she flew back. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of the more incredible stories where you look at it and you go, how is it possible that Kelly LeBrock wasn't Lisa first? Right. And if you read the script,
and it's unfortunate for Kelly Emberg because she never went on to really do much of anything. She has two film credits in the IMDb, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, I think it became a kind of a weird kind of like, she's just not good enough, or there's something off about her acting, or so it completely changes the course of 2 careers with this one decision, Rich. Because
Mm-hmm.
LeBrock, now I'm not saying LeBrock has a great career, but she has a solid film career. She definitely makes 2 or 3 movies where like she's in a Seagal movie. She makes some other movies, you know what I mean? Like that, you know, they're not necessarily great, but she's, you know, she makes The Woman in Red with Gene Wilder. She does some things, you know what I mean? She has a little bit of a career in the late 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this movie will be her, like, on her, when she passes, it will be Kelly LeBrock, star of Weird Science, as it should
And some
be,
other stuff. Yes.
and some other stuff. But the production is quiet. Nothing bad happens. They cast, like, the script is so weird that they cast. You know, one of the best things going is the fact that they kept it a secret about having Vernon Wells, reprising his role from The Road Warrior, and Michael
Basically.
Berryman, right? You know,
Mm.
from The Hills Have Eyes, you know, jumping on the set. But this movie is actually, production wise, is a huge thing with regards to actors that were in horror films. This movie, for whatever reason, was a place where actors in horror films ended up.
Yeah.
And you know, like, it's weird actually.
One
The sheer
other thing I
volume.
want to point out about the production, and obviously, you know, it's a science fiction comedy, but even at that point, so much of the effect work is done practical on the set. There's not a whole lot of opticals outside of like the lightning flashes over the house, the lightning flashes making the car disappear and changing the license plate. So much of that you would have thought maybe they did some model work for all the stuff coming up out of the chimney and then going back in. No, that was all done full size. They actually rigged like some kind of catapult thing to shoot, you know, books, paper, a couch, a piano out of this. You know, it's a much larger than normal chimney, but they did that practically, and they spent one night just shooting shit into the air and letting it crash down. And
Yeah,
then
it did. Yeah, it did.
the
But
next
it looks
day,
great.
they shot all that again in the daylight so they could reverse the film to show it all going back in. And I give them a lot of credit, and it must have been a lot of fun to have done that.
Well, and actually, you know, part of also looking at the production on this movie, it looks really good for an 80s movie. Like I don't mean it in a bad way. Like, the budget isn't super high on this movie, right?
Mhm.
And you know, as we jump
It was only,
into
what, $7.5 million.
only 7.5 million, but it looks fantastic. Hold on, we got a comment. Oh, Wendy's here. Hi guys, and also Molly Zombie's
Hi,
here.
Wendy.
Hi Molly. Hi
Molly.
everyone. Hello everyone from her. Also, Ken McKernan, The Abyss is amazing. Yes, it is one of the greatest.
Very
It may be. I'm going to say Terminator 2 and The Abyss are better for me than Cameron's later work. I'm going to be honest. I think that's. Ooh. Ooh. Okay, controversy. It's not controversial. Terminator 2
discussion for a whole nother show.
Terminator 2 and The Abyss are better. You fight me on it if you want to. And then Wendy says hi as well. A lot of fighting going on. We're fighting about you know, Tangerine Dream, and it's amazing. Production goes well, right? They get the secret. They have a 14. One of the other production side notes that I also found really interesting. When they filmed this movie, well, 2 of the production side notes that are interesting. Mitchell Smith, who plays Wyatt, is 14 at the time when he's filming, right? They basically filming, and he basically got a little tonguey. I'm going to say tonguey. Tonguey is a good way to go. With Kelly LeBrock, and she basically pulled him aside at one point in front of everybody and said, "If you stick your tongue down my throat again, I'm going to kick your ass." So the 14-year-old was trying to get major play. Other side notes of the production: Anthony Michael Hall gave up making a National Lampoon's European Vacation specifically so he could do this movie, and that has a ripple effect in that it leads to National Lampoon's Vacation recasting the children for every movie, which is an interesting thing. And then also, this is the last film that John Hughes and Anthony Michael Hall will ever make together. There's a major falling out on the set. They they never talked about it. They never talk about it, and they never bring it up again. But they never work together. So you're coming off. I was looking at the numbers, Rich. You're coming off years. You're coming off of 16 Candles in May of '84, Breakfast Club in February 15th of '85, and then this in August of '85. So you have Anthony Michael Hall, who literally becomes a superstar overnight, and he makes 3 banger movies with, you know, obviously one is you can't really quantify them, but all 3 of them are modern '80s teen classics, right? And then they never work together.
John Hughes was a writer on European Vacation.
Right.
And honestly, if you're a young actor, a young comedy actor, you're like, okay, do I stick in the same role, but work with director Amy Heckerling, or do I do a new role but stay with the same director I've been working with on my last 2 films? It's a tough call to make, because I can see
one's a lead. One's a lead, and he got paid lead money too, Rich. One's a lead. The other movie, he's schlepping around behind Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo.
That's true, yeah.
You know what I mean? This is a lead. He got paid. Ilan Mitchell Smith got paid $150,000. Anthony Michael Hall got paid $300,000. Which isn't, when you look at it, like how much money the movie made and how, like, it's not a lot of money. I mean, for 50, like at the time he was 14, he was something. Box office wise, interesting box office when you look at it. I got enamored with playing with the comparison charts, but domestic opening weekend is $4.8 million. The domestic box office ends up being about $16 million on a $7 million budget. And when you adjust it, it's about $42 million. So you're looking at a mid-range, like maybe horror film, something that, that does okay, but doesn't super catch on right at this moment. It doesn't have a huge international box office as well, but when you compare it, like it's really interesting. 16 Candles did very well. Breakfast Club did really well. And then Weird Science is kind of this weird redheaded stepchild that is beneath both of them, but maybe had the expectations of those 2 movies, which kind of hurt it a little bit, right? So you have, and then, a year later he has this, right? John Hughes has this, and that it more than doubles and triples all of his previous incarnations.
Also the following year, Pretty in Pink, which he did not direct, but he wrote.
Right. So it's the box office also is comparable to other movies of its kind. So like, you're talking about movies that are kind of like, I was amazed to learn. Did you know that Real Genius and Weird Science opened a week apart?
Yeah, I remember that.
I was thinking, like, I could not I was looking at the dates and I'm like, but I think Real Genius is more of an interesting movie also in the sense that I don't think that movie got discovered for another 7 years or so, where people really latched onto it and kind of found it when it hit VHS and when it hit, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Real Genius is an act of genius as well, I would say, for a number of reasons. And we've got to revisit. We've got to talk about that film at some point.
At some point, yes, I wholeheartedly agree. Actually, anything that she did in the '80s is a fantastic. She's a fantastic director. So I definitely want to do stuff about that. But Real Genius only grosses $12 million. So you have these 2 movies that are virtually, the audience is also the same. You know what I mean? Like quippy, kind of nerdy guy jokes, right? But the box office is, $42 million. And this, like, if you released a movie and made $42 million, you're talking a moderate hit. In this, like, No Hard Feelings and all these other movies that are coming out this summer are looking in that $30 to $40 million range, right? So, it's not Barbie, it's not Oppenheimer, it's not Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's a movie that would have done business and done well. And one would argue that the box office for this movie is totally inconsequential compared to what it did when it finally hit video, and when it finally hit, people could buy it or rent it, or, you know what I mean? Like when people found this movie, it becomes one of those cult movies. It is a classic 80s cult movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reviews. I'm going to tell you right now, I came out of this movie today. I watched it today. You and I watch movies usually the same days we're doing the show.
Mm-hmm.
My 11-year-old was super happy. My inner 11-year-old was super happy. I don't think it has nearly the grime and the problems that some of the 80s films have. I also think it's a very chaste sex comedy. Even though there's dirty part, like there's a dirty sequence, there's a dirty head to it. It never really explores those themes.
No, it's disappointing in a way that, I mean, there's a little bit of talk about other people's perceptions of their relationship, which is fun, and I think has a certain comment to it. But the fact that if the main thread of this film, the main character arc here is two kids who are just addled by their hormones, who objectify women as just an object to obtain, or losing their virginity as a goal to obtain, and they think they can go about it by this way, kind of realize, no, and they come away with a greater respect for women, or, probably, and I would say, a greater respect for just the idea of getting laid, because I'm sure that night that the girl at the end of the movie, when the girls stay over at Wyatt's, I'm sure everybody kept their clothes on. Which,
they wake up to Chet with a shotgun. Yes, they definitely. Well, and also I think one of the character
maybe that could have been, if they had been a little bit raunchier with it, in the first half, that would have strengthened how the end plays. I mean, it still plays, but I'm wondering if maybe they're right. Maybe it was a little too chaste for its own good here.
Well, and I think part of the chasteness is that it's it never gets past the fact that Wyatt and Gary are essentially nice horn dogs, right? It like there are two guys in the movie, Rustler and Robert Downey Jr. in an early appearance, who was apparently a terror on set as well, just an awful person to deal with on set. But they're played as douchebaggery. They're played as 80s comedy heels, bad guys in a comedy movie. And they're played for all the wrong reasons. Also, one of the most interesting things about this movie that has to be discussed, Kelly LeBrock, who is envisioned as the sex object / supernatural girl of your dreams, she's in complete charge the entire movie.
Oh yeah, she has all the agency in this movie.
Yeah, she is, and she is fantastic. She has sequences with every character in the movie. She has sequences with all the bit players in the movie. She has a fantastic sequence with the late Bill Paxton, who also, by the way, steals almost every scene he's in. I don't know that you can get any better than how do you feel about a greasy pork sandwich served in an ashtray? I don't know if you can get any better than that. LeBrock is fantastic. All of her line deliveries are great. And like, she flies into the character. She becomes a character. Gary and Wyatt are fantastic as well. And their ability, like the idea that she's teaching them to get over the fact that people will like you despite your limitations is fantastic. The two sequences at the end with the girls where they're dropping the girls off, they're really sweet. They're nice, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're super nice. And like, I think Anthony Michael Hall sequence where he's like, I'm not this cool, and I just want you to know that before we engage on this whatever is going to happen. And she basically says, I like you for who you are, and we've learned something as a group. We've also learned, if you're Chet, not to pick on your brother and be an asshole, or you're going to be turned into a. Now, somebody said that he's supposed to be poop, but I always envision he's a frog, right? He's a frog man.
Yeah. Now, before you said that this is kind of like the John Hughes movie that didn't have as much in relationship to like his other films, I would say, now that we're here, you're wrong. This
love
is,
being wrong.
you know, this much like The Breakfast Club or Pretty in Pink or 16 Candles. These are characters who think they wanted one thing or think they are one thing, and really discovering their true selves at the end.
I think that's true. What I was referring to is
that very easily fits in with the rest of his oeuvre.
Oh, I agree with that. What I was saying when I was talking about this, it's his most unrealistic path to those teen qualities. He chooses a mechanism, a sci-fi hybrid mechanism for kids that really love computers, and Frankenstein on a Saturday night.
Because
also, can I tell you something? Can I tell you something that I noticed tonight? And I don't know if you've ever noticed it. As I was watching the sequence, first off, there's a really cool CGI sequence in the middle where they're breaking into the government. Did you notice the one sequence that they break into the one area, and it's the Twilight Zone theme? It's a Twilight Zone opening. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah,
like the E equals MC squared, the eyeball. You know what I mean? Like, and I was watching it today, going, I subconsciously I probably have noticed it, but today was the day I really noticed it.
When they make that one wrong turn and go up the one corridor, and then there's the big skull and crossbones. The design behind is that same spiral from the famous Saul Bass Vertigo poster.
Excellent. That another thing, like just really cool.
I noticed for the first time today.
So we got some comments. Hold on. We got some comments. Joe originally says, we'll see. Talk about that in a moment. She said, yes, we will. Jamie Hill checks in. Hello, Jamie. Thank you for joining us. David Madison checks in. Dutch was a masterpiece. I think it's an underrated Hughes. I don't know. It's good. It's underrated. I don't know that it's his masterpiece. I think Hughes has other things where he's gonna be. Real Genius is a great movie. I just showed my age. That's okay. We're all the water's fine. There. Step in. A generation movie. And then he wrote, I want popcorn now for some reason. Sean, that is, we should put that on as some sort of like warning for our show. If you're watching our show, at some point you may want popcorn. That's just how it goes.
That's a Real Genius references specifically, though.
It is, but I also believe our show causes a want for popcorn. Anyway.
I just want to say at 2 o'clock watching Real Genius now.
Yeah, I feel Real Genius should have made our thing. So Rotten Tomatoes is a great place where we get aggregate scores, where you can also find really fun reviews on things. It chimes in with a whopping 59%, so it's just under fresh. But the audience score is funny enough. The audience score is 69%. So, which is kind of ironic and fun. But the reviews, the interesting thing about the past reviews, some were scathing and some were not, but most of them hone in on how good LeBrock is. And the idea that at this point when you're watching the movie, you were thinking that maybe we're getting a new star. Roger Ebert really liked her performance. She felt that the movie was funnier, a little deeper than the Predictor story it could have been. Janet Maslin, one of the great critics of all time, super hard on movies, amazingly, wonderfully derisive and hard on popular movies in effect and popular films and directors to a wonderful audience. Her quote was, Mr. Hughes shows that he can share the kind of dumb joke that only a 14-year-old boy could love. There are enough movie-going 14-year-old boys to make a hit out of Weird Science, of course, but for the rest of the population, its pandering is strenuous enough to be a cause for alarm. So I think that's the gist. You know, a couple of the reviews do touch on the fact, Rich, that Kelly LeBrock is a sex slave of some sort. And my answer to those reviews is she never has sex with any of the characters, except she does kiss the Wyatt character and apparently do some calisthenics. But she never really touches Gary. And she never, so I mean, the idea, I don't know. I think that's a lame review of it.
I do want to point out that Roger Ebert's friendly rival, Gene Siskel.
Oh, Siskel was rough.
Did not like this movie. I mean, he gave it 1.5 out of 4 stars and wrote pretty much, quote, "What a disappointment weird science is. A wonderful writer-director has taken a cute idea about 2 teenage Dr. Frankensteins creating a perfect woman by computer and turned it into a vulgar, mindless, special effects cluttered wasteland." And I'm going to disagree with you there, Gene. I'm sorry. I think it does have some things on its mind. It could have been sharper, but like I said before, it
could have been sharper. It could have been dirtier. Could have been sharper. Could have been dirtier. Could have been a lot of things. But what I found myself watching today, most of the stuff is funny. The CHET stuff is really funny, especially when I'm sorry, Wyatt, and then he eats the fly is one of the greatest things ever. There are some really quotable lines. I find myself a lot saying, in your race for power and glory, you forgot one small detail. We forgot to connect the doll. I find myself like it is a quotable movie. There's some really funny stuff in it. There's some really
one of my favorite sequences. One of my favorite little things is so small and so subtle. After Chet catches Wyatt wearing Lisa's underwear, and Chet says, "You're gonna next thing I know, you'll be wearing a bra on your head," and he does like a half a second take to the camera, like
it's perfect. It is
every time.
It's an Eddie Murphy quality side take. It's quality. I think the resolution is quack. I think the movie hums at 1 hour and 34 minutes. You can watch this and something else and not lose a lot of sleep. I think it also it is, for me, I think it's one of those essence 80s movies, right? It came out in 85, right in the middle of the decade. It's right at the cusp, and it's kind of perfect for our arc. And this is a perfect place to go. The legacy of this, first off, legacy franchise viability. We should note that there is a TV show that has 88 episodes. They did a lot of fun stuff on the show. I
think I've seen maybe one of those.
Yeah. There's 88 episodes, so it lasted for 4 or 5 seasons, right? I'm not going to disregard the show as if it lasted 88 episodes, Rich, that there's a show lasting 88 episodes in the 80s is a pretty substantial 4 seasons, 94 to 98. Vanessa Angel's Lisa. So I'm not gonna.
The TV series is available on Prime Video, so
if you want to catch it, like they do a lot. They had a lot more time to work with everything. But I thought, like a lot of 80s, like a lot of movies, this doesn't need a sequel. Now, we're gonna, like, one of the legacy things we have to discuss is that there is always kicking around. And, Elin Mitchell-Smith has talked about a sequel that it was being produced possibly by Joel Silver, making a comeback and making it more in line with The Hangover or 21 Jump Street. So, like, looking at the franchise as a whole from the 80s and trying to do that 21 Jump Street thing to it. And Ian Mitchell-Smith even mentions that Channing Tatum is one of the rumored stars. Now, I think he's too old to do a teen comedy. But if you're making a movie where somebody's trying to create a perfect woman or something, I guess you could do an older actor, making an older, sex comedy kind of thing. But I don't know that you're going to get the, innocent. There's a real innocence to Gary and Wyatt that makes the movie like wonderful to watch. Like, and they're trying so hard and they're so bad at the social. They're so socially awkward. There's a whole sequence where they're in the bathroom at their party, and Mr. Smith looks up and he goes, "I don't know, Gary. It's not that bad. At least we can hear the music." And it's this awkward wonderfulness. I think the two girls. I really enjoyed. We get a lot of movies where sometimes the girls aren't nice or aren't as cool as they can be, but Judy Aronson, who plays Hilly, and Susan Snyder, who plays Deb. If you're fans of horror films, they both appeared in several horror movies. Suzanne Snyder, especially Night of the Creeps, Return of the Living Dead 2, and Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And then also Judy Aronson was in Friday the 13th Final Chapter. So this movie is rife with really good performances. The legacy is that it, hybrids become part of it. And it's also the peak of the part of the 80s where the teen horn dog guys are starting to get more shading.
Yes.
Like, why are they horn dogs? How are they not part of the ability to be socially awkward with women?
Do they learn?
Yeah, it's the beginning of that. Hughes starts that with socially awkward people, but he starts shading it in. And as we progress through the rest of the 80s, we get more socially awkward guys that maybe have hearts of gold, but they don't know how to talk to people the right way, or nobody understands how cool they are as the nerdy guys. And I think it's part of an arc of the 80s comedies.
And I do want to hit on something too. You said, you quoted the line about, at least in here we can still hear the music. John Hughes is always known for having banger soundtracks to his films. And I really hate to say it, outside of, the title track from Oingo Boingo, he picks some good bands. I mean, you've got Kim Wilde in there. You've got Wall of Voodoo, Lords of the New Church, Killing Joke, and
nothing jumps.
None of those songs, though, are really hit any of their band's best material.
And I think part of the problem
which
with
is
that,
disappointing.
Well, it's super disappointing, but I think part of the problem with that is that the title track is so catchy.
Yeah, it's
the
such
title
a banger.
track. It's such a banger that when you put all this other music next to it, you don't even pay attention to it. And they're playing it. They play it over the title track. They play it over the end credits. You can't get it out of your head. I was, is it your imagination or is it real? I do not know. You know what I mean? Like it just gets stuck in your head. And part of, I think, part of it is Hughes usually has great soundtracks, but in this particular case, I think the title track takes up all the
air in the
oxygen,
room?
the oxygen in the soundtrack room. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think the legacy interesting. It's the end of the legacy between Hughes and Anthony Michael Hall, which I knew subconsciously. Again, these are subconscious things. They never make another movie again. But when you start reading about it, that it was like they had a backstage fallout and something really happened, and both of them never talked about it or to each other ever again about it. Is really kind of sad because they had made, these are three movies, and you think about something like, Matthew Broderick getting a year later. Are you telling me that if John Hughes wasn't working with Anthony Michael Hall wouldn't have been Ferris? Do you know what I mean? Like it sets off a chain of events, this particular legacy that it breaks. It sets up another chain of events where John Hughes has to go out and find other actors and start working with other people and moving around. And maybe it even starts off the idea, the chain effect, that he isn't going to work with the same people. So he Molly Ringwald stays, obviously, but everybody else kind of goes away. We don't get Judd Nelson. You know what I mean? Like it kind of a weird kind of like domino effect. But
now,
I mean, that's a terrible legacy, but it's something we have to talk about.
One part of the legacy here is 2 months and a week later, after this movie opened, Anthony Michael Hall and Robert Downey Jr., people forget this, were part of the season 11 cast for Saturday Night Live. This was Lorne Michael returning to the show after 5 years. He'd done the first 5 years, was exhausted, and said, hey, can we take a break before we do season 6? And NBC said, no. So Michaels walked. They brought in Gene Dominion, who, had that disastrous season. Well, critically, it's it was regarded at the time as disastrous. That was the one with Charles Rocket, Gilbert Gottfried, Denny Dillon.
And F-bomb here or there.
Murphy, and was a supporting player. And I mean, Gilbert summed it up best as like, imagine there's a band called the Beatles, and they're the biggest thing in the world. And then they said, we're going to put 4 other new people into this band, and we're going to call that the Beatles. That's the kind of position we were in. And I dare say that there was some good stuff in season 6. If you go back and you can watch some of that, some of the episodes are on the Internet Archive. But so there was like a 5 after that, Gina Minnie, and then there was 4 seasons where Dick Ebersol oversaw the show. And then
Boo.
Lauren
Boo,
Michaels
Dick Ebersol.
Lauren Michaels came back for season 11, and his idea was to kind of cast more actory people in the roles rather than, you know, people who were coming out of sketch and improv backgrounds from Second City or the Groundlings and places like that. So for that cast, you had Joan Cusack, you had Nora Dunn joining, John Lovitz, Dennis Miller, Randy Quaid, Terry Sweeney, and Denitra Vance, in addition to Anthony Michael Hall and Robert Downey Jr.
Maybe that was the falling out, Rich. Maybe Hughes was going, "Hey, you're my guy. I've been building you up."
I don't know. I don't know if that is or not. I've not read anything one way or the other. The only thing my thought would be was if the falling out happened while they were shooting, they shot so far in advance of this August release. Usually July and August is when they're doing the auditions for that new season.
For Saturday Night Live. So maybe. Well.
So I have a feeling the falling out happened, and then Lauren Michaels was looking around and saw that, you know,
there was
Weird
talent
Science
to be
was
had.
out, and he kind of liked what he saw. I mean, you know, Anthony Michael Hall's doing a character when he's playing, you know, drunk.
One of my favorite scenes in the movie. He doesn't even have his license, Lisa. He doesn't even have his license. It's one of the best scenes in the movie.
Am I okay?
It's one of the best sequences in the movie.
I'm not exactly sure if, you know, being in the movie got them onto the show, but, you know.
But it's a weird movie, and it's perfectly elaborated as sketch comedy.
Yeah.
It's got a sketch vibe to it.
I can see the dotted line between the two. And, you know, season 11 has its defenders and has its detractors. I think it's an interesting season because it's experimenting a bit with the idea that, you know, they're going and going with more performers with a stronger acting background than a, you know, sketch performance background. Doesn't always work. And then, of course, the season ended with everybody dying in a fire, with the exception of John Lovitz, it seemed. Was that? Or no, that was season 10? I can't remember. There was a season that they basically killed off the entire cast.
Yes.
With the exception of Lovitz.
But I think, you know, another legacy of the movie is this is a movie that if you're interested to get your teens into watching something from your past, you know, if people were watching the show are a little bit older and, you know, listening to us to yuck on about our movies that we love. But it's a great entry zone into the 80s comedies, right? It's not super risque. It's not, you're not going to have serious discussions. Like if you want to watch The Last American Virgin or, you know what I mean? Or Porky's, you're not going to have serious discussion or whatever. It's just right at the right edge. Let's see. Vanessa Angel was kind of hot. Yes. Anybody who's playing Lisa has to be hot. I don't know that Vanessa Angel is kind of hot, but she's not Kelly LeBrock in 1985 hot.
At the risk of saying something improper here, Roseanne Barr is never going to be cast to play Lisa in a remake of Weird Science.
Fair. That is absolutely fair.
She may have comedy on her best day. She may have good comedy chops, but there's also.
Well, and I think part of Lisa is
attributes that character.
The thing. Well, and that's a funny thing you talk about attributes. One of the things we didn't talk about production. When Emberg got fired, they didn't have enough money for wardrobe for Kelly LeBrock, and Kelly LeBrock is a little bit more stacked than Kelly Emberg was. She describes it. No, this is a true thing. She describes it. It's one of the funniest things. They literally cut the back of the dresses because I had bigger boobies, and there was no way I was going to fit in them. So they just slid everything up the back. And then you start, if you pay attention, you read that and you hear about it, you start looking at the outfit she's wearing, like the cutoff, like the gym outfit, or the outfit she wears to the mall. She's wearing a jacket over a shirt that says it's a Big Brother shirt. Yeah. Big Brother's watching you, right? Over her chest, but there's nothing up here and there's nothing down here. So it's just literally
a tube top.
It's virgin. It's not even. It's like a tube smock. You know, it's not even a tube top. But this is a fun movie. I think it's aged really well. I think the effects look good. I think the legacy of it is that, you know, we get hybrid comedies every now and then, and some of them hit. You know what I mean? This is 84, where, you know, we're a couple months after Ghostbusters. We're, you know, it's right around the time, or it's 85, I'm sorry. We're a year after Ghostbusters. Hybrids are starting to make the way, and eventually they'll become the way Hollywood focuses. And the idea of making a bunch of nerd sex comedy with guys with computers doing Frankenstein is one of the greatest hybrid things you'll ever want. So
it does have, and I've brought it up before, this does have one of my favorite stupid 80s tropes. Computers can do anything.
Well, yeah, it happens in a lot of John Hughes movies. Well, too, this movie and Ferris Bueller, the computer shit in Ferris Bueller is ridiculous. He's changing grades. He's changing number of days off. He's changed, like, you know, and he does the whole, you know, sequence where he's putting in, you know, sound effects so he sounds like he's dying. You know what I mean? Oh, how far we've come. But it's a fun movie. I enjoyed watching. I'm glad we chose it for this. Although I am super excited for next week, because next week is one of my all-time favorite underrated 80s teen comedies. And if you've ever seen it's really high on the list for me. I enjoy it immensely.
No, next are we doing the other thing next week?
This is next week.
I thought we were doing the other thing.
No, wait, is that next week?
I think so. I think that's Labor Day.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're not doing that next week.
Yeah.
I'm still excited. Wait, okay. I'm excited for totally different reasons. Okay, so next week we're not doing this, but we are going to do this movie because it is one of the greatest 80s comedies ever made. Holy shit, that is next week. Is it next week? It's next week already. Oh my god. Yeah. Okay, I lost track of time. I lost track of time and/or place and/or whatever. Maybe I was, in a race for power and glory. I forgot where the next show is coming from. It's from inside the house, very 80s. So next week, we have the distinct pleasure of bringing back Natasha Bogutsky. And she took a germ, a seed of a thought, and decided that she was going to run with it. Now, I don't know that she's followed every prefect of the deal we made. I don't know that she's watched Monster Squad yet. We'll have to ask her. But she did put her allegiances on the line and take one for us as a team, in that she got 2 guys, 2 girls, all ranging in ages from early 30s to late 20s, right? To sit down and watch.
Yeah. Actually, I think it's 3 guys, 2 girls, and her.
Okay,
they're watching it tomorrow night.
Okay.
They're all.
I thought it was 2 and 2, but it's okay. 3 guys, 2 girls are going to sit down in a house and watch Porky's, and then next week we are going to have a special edition of the show, basically where we look at somebody who has never seen something like this, and basically,
the reaction.
How did you miss this? And also, now that you've missed it and you've been forced to watch it by a bunch of crazy people on a podcast, how is it going to impact your life and change you in any way? Which I think is one of the great sociological questions of our day.
Like, this came up out of our Porky's episode a couple of weeks ago. Natasha was a guest. She enjoys the movie, but she said, people around her age don't really know the movie and hadn't heard of the movie really. and
this has happened a few times.
Yeah,
this has happened a few times with us and Natasha. The Fletch one was the biggest one.
I don't want to get into that again. I mean, and so we were interested in, okay, what's the generational differences here on Generation Movie, as to what things kind of get forgotten by the zeitgeist, what things kind of remain in the zeitgeist a little bit. Is it purely a cultural thing, or is it more of a I wasn't exposed to it, but other people were my age, because.
And so it became kind of a Lemmy thing.
Remembered and forgotten. So
it's going to be a super fascinating episode. We're doing Labor Day. So everybody will be off. You'll be day drinking, and then you can come to us at 10 o'clock next Monday night, and we can sit down with people who have never seen Porky's and see how it plays out to a generation that might have missed it. Now, for Rich and I, it was a cultural milestone movie. You had to see it at some point, or if you were behind the times. We have a quick question. Two things. Ken McKernan writes, LeBrock was sensual. Yes, LeBrock is also. I like Vanessa Angel, but I think LeBrock is also theoretically a better actress in the fact that she had to do it once instead of over 88 episodes. Do you think the missile in Weird Science was sort of an Easter egg from War Games? War Games came out in 83. Computers can do anything in the 80s because nobody knew what they were, right? So we can play globothermonuclear war with a sentient computer based on some computer guy's dead son. Yeah, maybe so, but maybe. I'll explain more. I'll explain more with both movies using a computer. Maybe not an Easter egg, but a nod to War Games. I think what it might have been, Sean, not necessarily a nod to War Games, but a nod to this thing that was just getting sent out to homes. Lisa, if you didn't know, Lisa's actually named after an apple, even though the computer in the movie is a company that Apple put out of business. There was an Apple Lisa, and Lisa is the name of the character in the film, and then it's made by I think it's Memotech or some company that you've of course never heard of because Apple put them out of business. And then let's see, we got birthday weekend from Ken McKernan. Join us on your birthday. It should be a fascinating discussion about how old Rich and I have gotten. Also, it should be a fascinating discussion on what the mores and what the social norms are for this generation of moviegoer, right? Because we're going to look at a movie that, defined smuttiness in the 80s, and we're going to put it up against whatever's going on. I don't know that we can compare TikTok-wise, porn-wise in the world with porn. You know what I mean? But it's an interesting thing.
Natasha and I were talking about this a little bit this morning, and I said, you have to remember, culturally, Porky's was kind of big, and it was also one of the biggest films of the year, box office-wise. So it would almost be like saying to somebody 40 years from now, hey, have you ever seen that Barbie movie from the 20s? And having somebody go, no, never heard of it. And that's how it sort of feels incredulous to us that 40 years from Porky's that people haven't heard of it. I think, and it speaks, I think, to something about cultural memory too, which we'll probably wind up touching upon next week.
It should be a fascinating episode. We're not going to have the basics, production, all the things we normally discuss. It's not going to be a traditional episode. It's a very special. It's a very special episode. It's our drunk driving episode, or our, it's a very special Generation Movie after school special on the effects of great 80s cult films. Sean also writes, didn't they try to get Matt B instead of Ellen Smith? Yeah. They try to get everybody. I think Matthew Broderick, though, was busy on Broadway, because I think Broderick is launching up Broadway right at that point. But Ellen Smith is pretty great. Ellen Smith never really works after this. He becomes a medieval English professor, which is fascinating. He takes all the money he makes, $150,000, and goes whatever. And then he goes as Wyatt. Yeah, I think they were trying to. I mean, but Hughes had a very set cast of actors. And he also tried to put them in, like, Anthony Michael Hall was a star though. So I think if you put Broderick in as Wyatt, you know, Wyatt is so meek in the movie, right? You put Matthew Broderick in the Wyatt role, maybe Anthony Michael Hall isn't quite as good as Gary, because Gary's the one that's the loud person in the friendship. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so fascinating show next week. Also, I do need to bring this up for anybody who's watching our show tonight. I've got some business happening. This is happening Tuesday, September 5th at 10 p.m. We're calling it The Path to Phantasm Orlando. Joe Ridgely and myself of the Indie Escape Network. We're going to talk to the Phantasm owner, Anthony Greco. We're going to talk to the head of Shock Reel Cinema Film Fest, which is a great bunch of short films, Shelley Stokes. We're going to talk to the head of social media marketing, Ashley Draven. We're also going to talk to people that are going, Terry Jarrell and Amy Rollison from Hollis Hunt, Bill Slevin, who's, of course, a world-famous paranormal investigator, researcher, and educator. We've already met him once. I had a fantastic meeting with him at a PopCon. I said it right this time. Great. But this is coming up on Tuesday, September 5th. We're also working on trying to get more people from the show to come on. I have my feelers out to a few actors and actresses. Because we're promoting the show. We're going to be at the show. Joe and I might be hosting some panels. So we're going to be all over the show. So we're doing this giant Path to Phantasm. We might have 2 or 3 shows leading into the big Phantasm weekend in September at Universal Orlando Doubletree. It is a great big con. It's got a lot of good things. They're doing a Night of the Demons cast reunion. They're also doing, the one I'm fascinated by is that we're getting a 15th anniversary reunion of cast members of Trick or Treat, which if you look really closely, like say right above the on-air thing, I am a huge Trick or Treat fan. They have several of the actors and actresses from that movie appearing. We are looking wholeheartedly at trying to get as many people as we can to come and talk on the network just about what being a Phantasm is going to be like. Also, just to get a chance to talk to some of these people who've been involved in some major filmmaking. I know there's Sleepaway Camp actresses going to be there. There's so many people coming to this con, and it's right around Universal Studios, right around the time they're starting Halloween Horror Nights. It should be a fantastic horror con, and we're going to do the lead up to it. Rich, where can people find you doing all your great stuff, like putting up all kinds of banner events like on FilmBuff Online? Where can they find you?
All of my film writing can be found at filmbuffonline.com. The other 2 podcasts that I'm on, one is the Big Picture Podcast, which you can find at bigpicturepod.com. We've been on hiatus for a little bit, but we should be back in about a week or 2. So, yeah, excited for that. The other is the Film Scribes, which is the official podcast of the Philadelphia Film Critics Circle, of which I am a member. And haven't put out an episode of that in a couple of weeks too. So, but you can certainly go and dig into the back catalog there for some great current film related discussion and reviews. You can find me on the Twitter and on Blue Sky under @FilmBuffRich. And FilmBuff Online also has a great Facebook page where we try to, let you know about the latest posts that we put up, latest news, and also some history, film history on this date type of stuff. So,
yeah, it's really great. And if you subscribe to it on Facebook or Twitter and the like, you get there's usually 1 or 2 a day, and they're just wonderful to look at and just kind of realize where you're at in your in whatever timeline.
And always feel free to share all of that with your friends too.
Yes, yeah. Also share it, like, and subscribe us on all the places where you see, Twitter or whatever it's being called by the loony in San Francisco right now. Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Subscribe, and then it helps us out. It helps you out. Makes you look cooler because you're hanging out with us, or maybe not. Whatever. It doesn't matter. You can find me online, JW Colwell, at JW the Movie Guy. on Facebook, on Twitter, whatever X. Next week it'll be Z or Y or whatever's in his brain cavity at whatever given moment he's being more, human, maybe. You can find me on Facebook. I also do a little show called Loud and Nerdy on Tuesday nights. We're in process of doing some things there. Stay tuned for that. We'll let you know more as that progresses. We're really trying to get a handle on things. But I have a show tomorrow night with Jerry Kimura and Kyle DeFina. It should be a lot of fun. Last week, co-host in hiding, the guy in a milk crate, showed up, and I was ecstatic to have my original co-host Paul Spratt last week. So it was nice. It was like finding somebody at the bottom of a lake after they got thrown out by creating a weird supernatural girl of your dreams. Anyway, but you can find us there. We'll see you next week for our big, weird, wonderfully wacky Porky's Redux.
Porky's Roundtable.
The Porky's Roundtable. Like, what'd you think of the peanut shell and a rubber band joke? Like, it should be a fascinating deconstruction of these people watching this movie tomorrow night. Rich and I are going to hear all about it. It should be very exciting. We're going to bring it to you as an interesting kind of a sociological / cultural / movie history / just entertainer, because these are all people that she works with regards to local stage acting in Northeastern Pennsylvania. I'm dying to see what theater people are going to say about Porky's. It should be very interesting. And then we can expect a Porky's musical before we know that. Let's see. And then let's see. Joe Ridgely says, I may pop in next week. Interesting. It'll be interesting to have 3 producers on the show next week. How many Indie Escape Network producers does it take to screw in a light bulb? None of us want to do it. We just let the light go out. Awesome. Night Brothers, glad I was free to make it. Thank you Joe, for joining us, Sean. And
Thank you, Sean.
Phantasm guests Nick Benson and Tamara Glynn on September 12th show. So we have 2, and I apparently missed the big picture for the second one, but I'll have it for you next week, because we'll be right on top of the 5th show, and we will be right on top of the 12th show after that. But Nick Benson and Tamara Glenn are fantastic guests that are coming to Phantasm. Looking forward to all of that. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great night. Go watch a movie. Big Porky's Redux next week. Should be a lot of fun.
Yes.
Have a great night. We'll see everybody. Bye.